Or yeah, I'm looking for my extension. One time. Yeah, I need one because that helps me keep on track. Or I'm losing my spot in my line. Okay. Let's call this meeting to order, the Learning Equity and Wellbeing Committee. Thank you for joining us. Acknowledgement of traditional lands, I will read that. We acknowledge that we are on land and surrounded by water, originally inhabited by indigenous peoples who have traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory is within the lands honored by the Wampum Treaties Agreement between the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenni, Lenape, and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Specifically, we would like to acknowledge the presence of the Huron-Wendat peoples and the Three Fires Confederacy, Ojibwe, Odawa, Potawatomi. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed to moving forward respectfully with all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. Thank you. For attendance, Trustee Armstrong is unable to attend today. She's given regrets. Trustee Nelson is here as well as myself and Superintendent Claire Howard as well as the Director Hudson. Declaration, approval of the agenda. Trustee. Also approve the agenda. Very short, quick vote. Declaration of conflict of interest, seeing no conflicts of interest. We'll move on to the approval of the minutes. We have someone to move the minute.
I approve the minute.
Thank you. In support of the minutes? Just a couple of hands up. Okay, there are no delegations. We have staff reports. Do we want to do them one at a time and take questions?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. So H1, strategic plan update report. Are there any questions?
I just first off want to say how very helpful this strategic plan was, but I just need some areas of clarification. Sure. In the strategic planning. So on page 5, it talks about the work being done around aligning the board resources and that we do not have a budget for the 2025-2026. Okay, how soon does that need to take place? How soon do we have to have a budget?
So we're anticipating through rumor that the province is going to announce their budget on May the 15th.
Okay.
In the past, it's generally taken 2 weeks after that
Okay.
for example, the healthcare budget, education budget. So we're hopeful by the end of May that we would know what our funding is from the ministry for our core education funding. As of right now, our board budget still needs to be submitted, as every board in the province, by June 30th.
Okay.
So that will be a substantial amount of work
Crunch time.
for the finance department to prepare a draft budget to bring to finance and facility services, to then bring to the board, to then have approval, to then submit within the deadline.
Okay.
Great question.
So we'll have to turn it around quick.
Question to that. I know just prior to my becoming a trustee, there were 2 years in a row where the budget was not actually passed until August.
Correct.
So the ministry may, if it wanted, could give extension to the boards from that regular June date. Is that right?
They may,
Or they may,
or they may not. A challenge with that will be I have staff on vacation who have made commitments and booked stuff. So, and I'm not the only director in that position.
yeah.
Because they work their work year schedules around, right? If it's due June 30th, then we're safe too. So hopefully, we're ready. Like as ready as we can be without knowing the money,
Right.
that once they put everything in, it all flushes out and we're in a good spot. Or the senior team will have some more work to do. But it's a waiting game right now,
Okay.
unfortunately. And part of that was because of the election being called. So the government couldn't form a budget to give to the treasury board to pass because there was no government, right?
But
Mhm.
then the big pool will get quite a while.
A substantial amount of
Yeah.
time, which causes even more delays. So I'm hopeful that they're gonna announce a provincial budget, already knowing the sector budgets. And release those right away, right after.
Okay.
That's what I'm planning.
Okay.
And that'll buy us 2 weeks.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that.
Mhm.
Any other questions on each one?
I do have a couple more questions.
Go ahead.
I see that on page 9, that the extended teacher use of certain recommendations, tools, and processes to support growth and literacy, that we're working with the University of Florida Literacy Institute Foundations. Is that because we don't have anything within our country to work off of?
Another great question. So yes, there is nothing for French
Okay,
available. So UFly was the only thing available to use as the assessment. However, there is discussion right now because of the recent procurement legislation that came of you can only buy in Ontario.
mm-hmm.
And then you can only buy in Canada and you have to put a business case forward. So because almost every board who has French is using this, they're looking to code to do a submission to the
Okay.
ministry instead of 72 business cases.
Right, just one.
Present one
collective.
business case or to look and see, is it available somewhere else
Mhm.
in Canada? But for right now, that is the only one. If it's not approved, we would not have a French resource to use.
Okay, is there a backup plan?
Not right now.
Okay. Okay, is that very costly?
Well, it could be extremely costly, especially if you're gonna have to be looking to a vendor in Canada
Mhm.
who's now just gonna be developing one,
Right,
and then there's gonna be a delay in it. I would assume that the ministry would say, well, there is no other option right now,
mhm.
and give a timeline and allow it to be grandfathered, for lack of a better word, for a period of time until a Canadian vendor could provide it.
Okay,
Because it's part of the right to read as well, right? From the Human Rights Commission to do the assessment and the screener. So it would be hard for them to now say, well, the resource isn't available
right,
to do it when it was one of the requirements of right to read.
okay. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Keep going. Keep that one.
I've got one more. Um. An arrow here, but I wasn't sure what that one was. And then on page 12, we're talking about the, item number 2, we're talking about regularly examining emergent data as a senior team to look for patterns that indicate problematic systems or structures. And I'm just wondering if we've identified what those patterns are and if we're able to speak on that.
So we have identified some, so we've had every school submit their school improvement plan. Senior team, the area superintendents have looked at every single one of them. They ask purposeful questions when they go out to the schools at every assistant principal meeting and vice principal meeting. We've looked at them with the teams. We've asked them to share their data. We also have access to all the data. So there's different patterns in different schools. So for
Okay.
example, some schools are seeing, I won't name the school, but one school, for example, is seeing that there's an attendance issue in grade 7 and 8.
Mhm.
So they're really focusing on what does that look like? What's the reason why students, instead of just saying, oh, kids are missing school, there's nothing we can do about their student achievement because they're not here. What's the root of it?
Mhm.
They're not coming to school, why? And then trying to dig deeper into that and doing outreach that way to then get them to school for the student achievement. Some schools are focused very much on reading, but specifically of who's not at grade level. And then what are the indicators related to that? Secondary, most of them are focusing on credit accumulation. So if a student is the age 16 and doesn't have 16 credits, what are they missing? Or graduation, are you missing your literacy requirement? Are you missing your community service hours? Are you missing credits? Is summer school an option to get those credits? So I'd say there's some common themes, but there's also very different themes based on each school. And then the area superintendents are working with each one of their schools around whatever themes they're identifying to then say, what are the resources that are needed? What's the professional learning for staff that's needed to be able to support them? And then what do we do different during PD days, or what do we do different during assistant principal meeting? So this year we had all of our principals and vice principals sit in their family of schools. Because oftentimes there's commonalities there. But then just today, we had a discussion about, do we differentiate those groups based on what themes they're seeing? So if a group's working specifically on, grade 1 reading, do they sit together? And then if we're working on credit accumulation, this group sits together. So they're more of a homogeneous group working on the same problem of practice.
Okay.
And what are you doing in your school that I could do in my school? And then we come back next month and we share.
Sure.
So it's been, I think, a great journey and lots of discussion. The nice part is it's specifically about students.
Right.
So they have lists of students. Another example is with the restructuring of the RISE program. I've said to the principals who have a RISE program in their school, you need to have a list of every student who's in the RISE program so that we can monitor their achievement next year to make sure the resources and supports are put in place. So that's a theme for those schools, in addition to other things they're looking at too.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
It's been really good. I think lots of learning and lots of discussion.
Now, do we have a projection of how this type of learning and this will impact long-term, or are we going based off of year to year, how things turn out?
So I think we've committed, we created a new school district as a senior team. We did a little activity. You're just starting a brand new school district. Anything we've ever done before, we might not do again. And anything that we're currently not doing that you would like to do, what would it look like if we were just starting brand new? And what would our priorities be? Instead of, oh, we do this, we do this, we do this, what would our priorities be? Not shocking, we identified early reading, mathematics, and graduating from high school. So then we did charts around the whole room about what do we need to do to be able to achieve those goals? What do we need to do for graduation? What resources need to be put in place? Maybe it's work in the area of poverty. Maybe it's work with a specific marginalized group. Maybe it's so our hope is that we keep that focus for a long period of time to be able to monitor these resources are what really helps students, or this professional learning really helped the teacher. So we're going to do it again and again and again, or it didn't really work. Do we need to give it more time? Or do we just say, we thought it would work, it didn't work. What else should we be trying?
Okay.
So, yes,
Okay.
principals have probably looked at more data this year than recently for a while. Yeah. I think they may have thought it might go away, but they're realizing
It's not going anywhere.
it's not going anywhere.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. H2 is managing anti-black racism report. Is there any questions?
Yes, I have questions. So on page 15, we've done some reading amongst our principals and vice principals. And there's some specific bullet points here that talk about cultivating relationships with stakeholders, addressing equity challenges, gathering student, staff, and parent perspectives. I'm just wondering how our team here is using these bullet points to effectively support our Black students.
Well, I can start with this. this book, the senior team also read. It's an outstanding book because it's actually quite pragmatic in actual things that can be done
Mhm.
on a day-to-day basis. We read this book after reading Street Data, which was very powerful, also by the same author. The principles, I have to say, the feedback that I have received, it's interesting. I've been getting some feedback on it that people will say this aligns directly to what I'm doing in conversations that they're having with their area superintendent. That's connected to what Vicky's talking about, right? Because a lot of this work that Vicky was just alluding to is actually generally working with groups of kids that have demonstrated needs. In some cases, they're students that are systematically marginalized,
Mhm.
right? So, like, I'll give you an example of this, the gathering students, staff, parent perspectives as rich data for improvement. The whole culminating end of the book talked about ways that you could engage in like listening. They gave an example. The book is US bound, but it gave an example of the author starting a new school district and realizing that one of their deficits was they didn't know how to work with people.
Mhm.
So they engaged in a process of uh 90% listening and 10% speaking to hear what's happening. So we talked about this as one of the strategies that could be done. Like, and we said, what if, in fact, by between now and the end of the year, you engaged in a campaign of talking to different groups of people at your school, parents, students, the MSA, the Black Student Alliance at your school, to actually listen to what they have to say and
Mhm.
use that to feed what are changes that need to happen in my school.
Mhm.
So this is more, it's guided as a framework for people to consider, but it's not a standalone, Christy.
Mhm.
It's connected to all the actions that are being done because equity is not like this.
Right,
Equity is
sounds-
integrated, yeah. So it really aligns to the work that Vicky's talking about that is happening with superintendents and principals and thinking about specifically all the students at your school, special education students, Muslim students, Southeast Asian students, Black students, Indigenous students. So I recommend the book. Like, I really, really liked it myself
Mhm.
because it was quite pragmatic and things that could be done.
Mhm.
It was one of the books I liked, Vicky.
I can say some you didn't like. For good reason. I think one of the things specifically, Christy, is around the gatherings, student staff that I've heard from several principals. Because we did our student census
Mhm,
and we had a very small
mhm,
uptake
Mhm.
on it. Several of them have said, when are we gonna do it again? And there's that question about how often and when is too many times of trying to survey people. But principals have said, like, I don't necessarily know who's in my school,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And I don't want to make assumptions of who's in my school.
Mhm.
So I don't have that specific data and I actually had the conversation with Tana Turner about that, around one of our special education programs. And she said, well, maybe it's not about the data. It's an informal collection of the data of actually just having conversations with kids.
mhm.
Conversation.
And I'm like, sometimes we forget that, right? Because we get so drawn to, well, what's the number of X?
Mhm.
Instead of just, and she said, walk into a classroom and look. And then just have a conversation and students will tell you who they are
Yeah.
and what challenges they're experiencing or what successes they're experiencing. So just don't rely on all the formalities, was
Right,
basically her of just talk to people and then listen.
And that's also connected to our equity plan in like a caring adult in the schools. So it's around getting to know the kids that you're
Mhm.
serving. Because when you, like Vicky said, when you sit with kids, they do tell you. They
Okay.
tell you loud and clear.
Oh,
So we-
yeah, they're
We
not
don't need
afraid.
to leverage the different groups in our Greater Essex County District School Board community, like the Black Student Alliance or the Black Employees Network or, those other smaller.
do?
groups.
You do, yeah.
Absolutely. So we met with, I always say it wrong, Mencia,
Yeah.
our Muslim,
Mhm.
uh, East,
Middle
Middle Eastern,
North African.
North African, South
Southeast
Asian,
Asian.
Southeast Asian
Mhm.
That's one.
staff.
Menacing.
Yes, staff.
Mhm.
And it was an exceptional meeting.
Mhm.
And they were very clear that we walked away with, here's some really clear things as a senior team, we need to listen to.
Mhm.
And we need to work in how do we make a difference for that? Because this is what our staff's experiencing. So doing that with the small groups absolutely is really beneficial.
Yeah.
Some groups, I will say, aren't comfortable when administration's there,
Right.
and I respect that. But it's on us to say, okay, you may not feel comfortable if we're there. But how can we still get the input? Is there someone at the meeting who can then give us feedback? So it remains anonymous, but it's coming from the group
Mhm.
to hopefully build the relationship where, okay, well, you can come for half an hour and then leave.
Right.
So that we do gather the input and then, we'll get there. But it is important for the smaller groups particularly,
Mhm.
to hear the voices
Right,
and our community partners as well.
right. Are those groups, like I have a note here, that we have different groups, like the Black Senate and JIAD and IAC and the Black Student Advisory Committee, do those groups ever come together collectively to then brainstorm and provide feedback and insight in ways that are not identifying?
We haven't yet.
No.
Um, I think we put an invitation out if people wanted to. Great. And as we're with each group sharing that there's a possibility of that, we've talked about it with students,
Yeah.
not having separate groups.
Mhm.
Or having the separate groups plus one group.
Mhm. I
Of
just-
those from individual groups that want to come together,
Right.
similar to Student Senate,
Yeah.
but different,
Mhm.
to hear the voices, because then you learn and hear from others too, right? So, you think you're experiencing this, then you hear what someone else is experiencing,
Mhm.
or what worked for them that, maybe I can take those strategies too, and then we learn from that.
Mhm.
This is working for this group of students, yet we haven't done it for this group of students because they're still experiencing
Mhm.
microaggressions, oppression.
I just wonder because in reading some of this, it's not only did we not get the good numbers for, not good, but
Mhm.
the numbers for the survey, but there's some lack of trust potentially in
Mhm.
here. And so if we can build a sense of
Mhm.
community amongst
Mhm.
everyone and
Yep.
maybe the floodgates might open
Yeah.
to some
Yeah.
additional sharing.
Are you referring to Ben?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ben was
Yeah.
one of the
Yeah.
areas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I had a couple more questions.
Go
Okay. Um, so in section 5.6 on page 18, we talk about a partner and advocate with the University of Windsor administration for more Black students into the faculty, especially into the Faculty of Education, to graduate more Black teachers. I'm wondering, do we have any type of scholarship or anything, not like an incentive, but you know how we have scholarships for like skilled trades or scholarships for tech, for example, or it's not the word that I'm looking for, but engineering, for example.
Mhm.
Do we have anybody in community who might create a scholarship,
Hmm.
or can we create a scholarship around
Hmm.
enticing more students from different ethnic backgrounds to go into the education field? Not to say that that's going to entice them at all, but does anything like that exist?
Not that I'm aware of.
We've
That's a
had-
great suggestion.
Yeah, we've had some initial, like I've had, because I do equity and sovereignty, I've had some conversations, not necessarily with the university, but with St. Clair. Because the university, well, one, the university does the diaspora conference, and right there, anybody who takes part in the diaspora conference and goes to the University of Windsor gets $1,000 scholarship.
Okay.
Yeah, that's, I don't want to
Yeah.
turn my nose up to that.
No.
That's $1,000. So, yeah, and
Mhm.
potentially we send about 50 kids each year. And I said to the college, what can you do? And they also offer, the university will give a scholarship when we do our Indigenous, or bursaries when we do our Indigenous graduation.
Mhm.
So I think we need to, it's been spoken about, but I think we need to coordinate, because I'm like, these are ways that you can get kids to come to your school. And it's an incentive. We offer one award within the board, and it's a $500 bursary, the Vern Mahadio Award,
Mhm.
that is decided amongst for CYF students. But the university, we have two perfectly wonderful institutions here that they do one for the Indigenous, but they don't do it for Black students, and I think we can explore that a little bit more.
Mhm.
And we offer within our board an Indigenous graduation, like bursary, and it's called, Every Child Matters, and it's based on students who can demonstrate a need because of their experience or impact of residential schools. And that's funded through, our t-shirt sales
Mm,
of the Every Child Matters t-shirt.
okay.
So, but I think there's some possibility to happen. We're trying to think about that.
Mhm.
Just a suggestion. Mind you, some people would argue that the desire to become a certain individual in the world happens very early, like grade 2,
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
what kind of experiences are young Black people having
Mhm.
in schools
Right.
to encourage them to
Right.
want to become teachers?
Mhm.
And not to say you isolate them and do different things, but I'm just saying we have to,
Very early.
yeah,
Mhm.
okay,
Instead of a lack of trust.
yes.
And that's a profession I never want to go into
That's
because
right.
of what I experienced.
Mhm.
It's a whole different narrative.
Excuse me.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you for that. Um. And so, on page 20, section 4.12, it talks about developing Black history resources for schools in consultation with African diasporic community partners.
Mhm.
I'm wondering, it says too that the schools, I'm gonna go off script for a minute. I believe I read that the schools are actually celebrating Black history, like all schools. Is that correct?
They're doing it, we have tried to set up a framework for them to celebrate Black history beyond just Black History Month.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and how do we measure that? What's the accountability piece along with that? Or are we still a work in progress?
I think it's still a work in progress. I will say, though, a year ago, I wouldn't have been able to tell you there was a presence of celebrating Black history in all of our schools. This year, I could confidently say yes, because we created these releases
Mm,
at electronic and an actual, like, it's so cute, this little release of all these materials. And there were either digital or concrete bulletin boards. Many schools they included students in it. It was outstanding what happened. I think we need to formalize that monitoring process, and superintendents, when they went up to their schools, asked, so where's your display? What have you done? Tell us. And schools were able to articulate that. I gave them a framework to develop a plan. What could be happening in your school over the duration of the year?
mhm.
Sometimes it can be small, sometimes it can be bigger, but how are we celebrating that? So that's happening now, and it's been interesting because students have, in some schools, have taken agency in being part of that.
Mm,
It's not perfect, but
Mhm.
it's way better than a year ago. I wouldn't have been able to say that.
Okay, and is it
Yeah.
all classrooms that are participating or?
In some schools, they're doing like, again, it varies, but at the very minimum, you know that there's representation in the school, right? But, some schools are doing assemblies, and different classes are taking different people that they could, or different time periods that they research and do a presentation within their school. Like, it's really quite extraordinary what's happening.
Mhm.
And it's through the East, Equity Advocate Support Team member and the administration. And of course, we worked with our BSAC too, on that, and they were delighted when we did the releases, because they are active within their schools. In, presentations. Some schools did, the SAC students did presentations. They did an assembly for the whole school.
Hmm.
So there's variability, but at the very least, there's a presence within the school.
Right.
Some schools did bulletin boards all over the school, QR codes, where kids had to go around and learn about different people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they tried to make it engaging and interactive.
We had a
We have
lot of
schools-
uptake on getting bulletin boards.
Yes.
Well,
So then how do we make this something that's the norm all year round? Like
That's
what is, because
Yeah.
we have it now in grade, what is it, grade 8, 9, and 10, there's options, but how do we make it part of the fabric of what we do? And can we take the lead on that as a
Mhm.
school boards?
Funny you say that. I just got an email because of I just opened it today, from, the ministries doing the revised curriculum, and they want to meet with us because of the work that we've done in our board around Roads to Freedom, which is the work with the Essex County Black Historical
great
Research
community.
Society, the 4-H modules, and I said, sure, we're glad to meet with you. I'd love to see some of our work shared more provincially.
Yeah.
Because it's
congratulations. That's good
outstanding.
news.
We continue to have that conversation, Christy, about, and we talked about a different member at East, like growing the capacity among staff. We're working with several ideas, so it doesn't become one person's work, that it's everybody collaboratively working and building student agency with it.
Mhm.
So I don't know the full answer yet. I will also know once the budget is determined and what money we have to work with, and
Mhm.
we're creative in working with our partners. We did have an initial meeting with the groups that are talked about there. We talked about doing, we have these roll-up signs. So if we wanted to focus on something in schools around Black excellence, to create a set of signs that could go like traveling the schools, right? Focused on, Black scientists or Black athletes or whatever it might be, so that there are traveling presentation that could happen.
Mhm.
And I'd like to involve more BSAC. Like the conference this year was really great, but the kids tell us where we need to do better, right?
Mhm.
And I'm like, they're right, that how could we make them more in charge of, like they own it, but they could own it even more.
Mhm.
And I think we need to pass ideas around them because they'll tell us. And wouldn't it be great if they were presenting in their school, if this traveling unit went around, that they did a presentation? I don't know what all the answers are, but we're continuing to explore and meet and trying to be creative in what we do.
Okay.
And I think from a monitoring piece,
Mhm.
I reflect on that part of it.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if, because we're very strategic, so when the superintendents do their school visits, they all ask exactly the same questions to their principals. We, as a team, create them, like, what should we be asking, right? And so it's always around student achievement, but then there's other questions that are being asked too, for us to get a gauge on. So maybe that is one of the questions, right? Is what is your school doing about A? What is your school doing about? So throughout the year, we're sprinkling that in
Mhm.
of those questions, which then when the team comes back and said, well, I didn't see any evidence of this happening, or the principal said they put up a bulletin board, or they have every single class engaged in that's gonna give us an idea from a system level of what's happening.
Mhm.
Right? Thank you
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we communicate to people, this is happening in the community, you might wanna, but you need to, like, just sending out an email doesn't work. Like,
No.
so when we shared that ACT was doing the play, it was sold out.
Freedom,
Yeah, it
Mhm.
was sold out. But we have to push it too, right? Hey, did you know that this is available? How are ways that you could get your kids there? So that becomes part of the East sessions, and maybe we need to find other ways of doing it, but. And Vicky's right, when the superintendent asks, they'll pay attention to what you're asking them.
Well, and then they call each other and tell each other that Karen's coming to your school. Here's what she's gonna ask you, so you can be prepared, which is fine. Because we want them to be prepared. Another piece I'll add too is, so the Human Rights Commission releasing the anti-Black racism report. I've read it, I think, 3 times. I've read certain sections of it more. Still trying to, because it's substantial of digesting. And then it'll be interesting, like the right to read, what recommendations come out of that? What is the ministry gonna say must be done? It's the first, I think, ever report I've seen where unions are actually mentioned. I've never seen that anywhere in a human
Okay.
rights. And it's very clear. There's certain sections around. So not that we want to wait for direction on that, because I think we're doing some great work already, but I think that's also going to help to substantiate, here's the reasons why.
Mhm.
And it's a Human Rights Commission report of the work that must be done, not should be, must be done,
Right,
because there was an entire group involved to create that.
right.
So
And this will be year round,
constant,
constant, yeah,
constant.
okay.
And hopefully with that will come some funding from the ministry, like it came for Right to Read. We've supported through our core funding. But if that came, like, so, an example would be the Black graduation coach.
Mhm.
Um, the funding's actually up this year for that position.
Oh, okay.
So we're desperately waiting,
To see what the budget says.
right? Which would be hard pressed when you release a
Mm-hmm.
anti-black racism report and you don't put funding to support. We'll see.
Okay.
We do have it in our budget. In our draft budget.
We have all the data to back up how valuable this is.
We do, and that's why we agreed as a team. It needs to continue.
Any other questions on page 2?
None for me.
Okay. Moving on to H3. Leadership Development Report.
That, Madam Chair, that's where I had my typo. There are a total of 35 aspiring leaders. And I put XX because I had to correct the number and I didn't put it in there. Sorry, I'll have that corrected.
I was trying to do the math while looking through it, like 22 plus 35 minus, okay. I did have a star beside something. I just gotta figure out what my messaging here was. So on page 23, I think this is the question I had, but it says starting strong mentorship programs.
Mhm.
So this is taking place in our system now.
Mhm.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, to support achievement and well-being. I don't know what my question was there, but that's great to know what's happening now.
Mhm.
I know that with some organizations that have Black employee networks as well. They have specific mentorship opportunities for their Black employees to merge into leadership positions. I'm not sure if this wouldn't be specific to just Black. This is all,
Oh.
yeah,
Mhm.
okay, that's
Mhm.
beautiful.
Mhm. I'll get that corrected.
We'll plan on that one.
Yeah.
Okay. And the one report, each for the Equity Action Plan report. Also there,
Mhm.
any questions?
I do not believe I have questions for this one.
Okay. Very good then. Before we move on to staff reports, I'd like to suggest we move these reports to the full board meeting package, so they get a paper copy, because some of us older trustees like the paper over computer screens.
Mhm.
So are you okay with
I'm
that?
okay with that, yeah.
Okay. New business, I don't see any. Trustee motions for consideration, nothing. Trustee notices of motion, nothing. And adjournment, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So Anna, if you can just make sure Melissa has them all.
I'm gonna there's just two little things to correct. I'm gonna, yeah.
Yeah.
With you, Anna.
No problem. Include them all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we've got